All right, hello.
Hello.
All right, so do you want to start by telling us who you are and what you do?
I'm Henry, and I'm the founder of Dom Dom Permaculture. Dom Dom means firefly in Vietnamese. And my wife Ling and I, we run the farm here, which is in northern Vietnam, in Hoa Binh. And we effectively apply permaculture, natural farming and agroforestry to our land to regenerate the soil, grow food for ourselves and make our own produce. And at the same time, we help others to do the same.
So how did you choose this life and this method?
Yeah, I didn't come from the background doing farming at all, let alone being in nature, like growing up in London. So it's quite a bit of a U-turn, I suppose. But when I was traveling when I was 21, I came across a farm, a very small farm in Malawi in Africa, and the person who owned that farm was practicing permaculture. And I think I just asked for a short tour of the farm. And after about half an hour of him explaining things, I just felt sort of captivated by it. This idea of creating food systems that mimic nature. And then after deciding to explore further on that and spending time in Colombia, I felt what it feels like to put your hand in the soil, to grow your own food, and to understand what it takes to do that. To understand how much energy and time and care it takes to grow that food. And then when it comes to your plate, how much more you appreciate it. And how sometimes difficult it can be to grow things without chemicals. You know, so how just using compost and natural fertilizer that you've made yourself, understanding how the soil works, which takes time. And yeah, that just sparked something in me that made me feel like I really want to go further down that path. And it's a long path, but it was, I guess, nourishing for me on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level. And it gave me some sense of purpose for myself and calmed my mind down as well. Yeah, very grounding.
When you started growing, was there anything that shocked you, like how long it takes to grow something?
Peanuts. Yeah, since I was a kid I love peanut butter, so I always like to absolutely go to town on a tub of peanut butter, and just realising it takes 4 months to grow peanuts, and you know each plant doesn't create that many nuts itself. Yeah, it made me value that a lot more.
So if permaculture had like a headline, what headline would you give it?
Personally, I see it as a way to create food systems that mimic nature, and that are inherently not only sustainable but regenerative. So let's say we take a field that's got nothing, just grass, and we let it be. We don't cut the grass, we don't let cows come on it, we do nothing. Over time, the grassy field will turn to a forest. So the processes within that are kind of complicated, but in essence, you see over time that the diversity of that field will increase over time. The fertility of that soil can also increase over time. The diversity of microorganisms in the soil can increase over time. That's a natural system, but if we look at a human system, we see that soil tends to be degraded over time. So the idea for me, permaculture is to replicate that idea, that system in nature, in order to apply it to our food systems in certain ways that are possible.
Why do you love what you do?
On a personal level, it was, as I touched on, I feel calm and grounded when I'm in the garden and outside. I'm connected with what's around me. On a wider level, I feel like it's a small change that can add up to a big one around. These practices that I apply in my life, if applied in many different regions, they can add up to be something big. So although I don't try to see myself as trying to be that change as a one big force, I see small changes in each area and each family and each person can add up to be a change.
If somebody perhaps watching this who maybe had never heard of permaculture or natural farming before, but wanted to contribute in some small way to that change, what examples would you give them?
I think I'd say just do what you're capable of doing within your context. If you work a 9-to-5 job and live in the city, of course going to live on the farm and grow your own food and sell produce is not necessarily the best option for you. I mean, it can be, but it will take time to get there and to learn what you need to know. So just focus on what you're able to do. So if you're living in the city and you have a small garden space, try growing your own food. Try composting your own food waste. Try raising worms and making vermicompost. Even that in itself, although it doesn't seem like anything big, it can be. Not just on a practical level of, you're creating your own food and reducing your own food waste, but you're starting to understand a bit more about the food system, and perhaps in the future that might inspire some change in you as well. And then, conversely, if you are a landowner and you're applying lots of chemicals to the field every year, and you're starting to see that that's either damaging your health, soil health, or in some ways it's not sustainable for your land, then perhaps try to make a small change on a small scale. So let's say you have 1 hectare of land. Instead of making wholesale changes to the whole land at one time, because that's probably going to be really risky, I would say try on 10% of your land, try some new practices half of the year and see how it goes. And then if things are positive, then you can scale it up. It could be something like you use half the amount of synthetic fertilizer and you supplement it with the other half will be fertilizer that you've made from natural sources, and then maybe the next year you can do 80% natural and then 100% natural, and if it works for that 10% of your land, then after that you can scale it up. Ultimately there's a lot of different practices that can be employed, and it can depend on what your situation is. It doesn't have to be prescriptive. It can be what works for you and what your capabilities are.
Henry, what do you think the world needs more of?
Quiet time in nature. I think we're so busy as a people. We're so tied up in our work or things that we have to do, even myself as well. We're so tied up in our activities, our meetings, our calendar, what we have to do. Especially when we're living in a city, it can be overwhelming. And it doesn't have to be anything, extreme, like going camping in the wilderness or anything, but I just think quiet time without sort of distractions and technology around plants, trees, and in nature itself, I think is extremely grounding and healing for humans. We are people of this earth, and as we the more time we spend disconnected from that, I think it disconnects ourselves with who we are and unsettles us as people and as a society, and that individual disconnection ripples out and it can cause issues. So I think the more time that individuals can spend in quietness in nature, I think is a